Welcome to Mythical Phylogeny Adventures. I'm your guide Jason. Often in fantasy series, we come across wild and incredible cultures, and they are heavily influenced by the monsters which live nearby. But what happens when the people are all the monsters? How would a city of the undead work? I want you to imagine it, adventurers. You're traveling on your quest, sent by the king. You have crossed mountains and rivers, and now enter a desert. It's hot, and your throat is parched. Your water bag having run out on the last sand dune. Or was it the one before? You are nearing your limit. Then your eyes see something on the horizon. It's a town, and that means water. Your mind flashes with wild dreams of baths and drinks. You imagine being able to sit in the shade and rest freely. A haven. A place to recover before venturing out once more. But as you reach the city, you notice something is off, but you can't place it. Ignoring your suspicions, you press on towards the gate. And when you get there, you see undead guards standing outside and you freeze. That's when you realize where you are, the necropolis, the city of the dead. For many fantasy worlds, this could arise. We have our Lich Lord amassing an army of the undead until it becomes a city. Then what happens? Well, if he's evil, you could get the usual hero's journey and the Lich is slain. His army falls away in doing so. But what about a benevolent Lich? One which still holds some semblance of humanity. Would they attempt to integrate or stand separate? I don't know. Several fantasy series have attempted to create such a situation. In Dragon Age, there is the country of Navarra, where the undead are heavily used. In addition, there is the Overlord series, with the Sorcerer Kingdom, ruled by the Great Lich, Ainz Gaun. But both of them mix other races and factors in. So not pure cities of the undead. Now, we've already debated about the nature of necromancy, and generally, it's more neutral. Based on the comments, it would seem that most of you believe that necromancy's alignment ties with the actions more than the spells itself. So, for our undead city to work, we need to go with necromancy isn't evil. But I'll touch on that version a bit too. Okay, I need to ask a redundant question. But what is important for a city to exist? Your first thoughts are probably things like buildings, walls, streets, and so forth. But no, in reality, the first thing you need is people, and in this case, undead. Now, this will end up going to a story-by-story argument, which will get us nowhere ever. So we need to make a few assumptions. First off, undead maintain their intelligence to some extent. Secondly, they maintain some concept of individuality. Thirdly, that they can still move, touch, see, hear, and speak. Yes, there are workarounds for those, but they make things so complicated and reduce undead to things which struggle to interact with the world. Yet, there are a few things which undead are often said not to need. Namely, food and water. That means an undead city doesn't need to be built on waterways. We need to drink water to survive, and we can only go a few days without drinking. Now, there is an exception here, such as when the undead need to bring in mana or something similar to maintain their existence. The lack of water is why deserts are such a major hurdle for travel, among other threats. In addition, they don't eat. Then, the undead do not need farms. For much of human history, majority of humans were farmers. It was their excess crops which would supply the cities, and from there, inventors, artists, nobility, and scholars. So, if the undead don't need farmers, then they can devote all their people to other pursuits. So, we can put our undead city out in the middle of nowhere without a problem. Okay, that's actually a complete lie. No, the undead aren't going to build a city anywhere. As is always the case, it comes down to location, location, location. They will likely build in a place that would promote safety, such as those flying islands we talked about a bit ago. They can build in remote mountains, unfazed by elevation and cold. Yep, they can build on the top of Mount Everest. Sure, they'd have to deal with snow, but they can shovel it. Or they could build in a sealed off cavern. So, there are a lot of places that they could build, which will keep them safe from outside influences. But there is something else which an undead city wouldn't have, and that is sewers. Seriously, why have them? What good is a waste management system if your people aren't making waste? The only reason to build something like this is for an access system under the city, or for a storage location, or for a water drainage system in case of floods, and that's it. Outside of that, there really isn't a reason for them to have sewers. Now, I mentioned not needing farmers, and that means they would allow their population to focus on the arts and sciences. But those require supplies, and that could be used to justify them having crops. Not massive ones, but some. And with that, mines and quarries. Yes, they will still need to do some sort of manual labor. That can be helped, and it can still be dangerous. Yet, this could open up trade options. However, those sort of jobs will have casualties, and that brings up population growth rates. And the undead have problems here. They don't reproduce, they recruit. That means they will need a way to get access to corpses. No matter what, they will need immigrants. They will either need to find undead living out on their own, or people who want their remains reanimated and move into the city. Yet there is an option, one which I did talk about, which most fantasy series choose, and that is the hybrid approach. A city with both the living and the dead in it. This would ultimately force the undead city to function similar to a normal human one, but with the undead in them, so sadly not a great topic. Yet there is an aspect of it which would arise. In our world, society has generations, but those generations are separated by only a few decades. And the oldest usually starts phasing out of the workforce eventually, but that isn't going to happen in an undead city. Unless we bring in the factor where the undead eventually truly die, they will keep going. This means we can get stagnation on the workforce. The older ones aren't leaving higher positions, and room for promotions is going to be slow, if not impossible. In addition, this brings up the slow changes in society. How do languages evolve? Why is the K in night silent? Well, it wasn't always. In addition, the sounds of multiple vowels have changed. In fact, German and Dutch are the most similar languages to English. So what's the point of all this? Well, you are likely going to have dialects based more on age than locations. And it may take some work to communicate across the population. Would you understand someone speaking a 1,000-year-old variation of English? Well, somewhat. It's really similar to German back then. And this language barrier could play a part in the politics of the city. Will there be a king? Noble houses? Well, this is likely going to come down to a series by series situation. But we can pinpoint a few factors. How are the undead raised? If there's a lich involved, they would likely hold the noble positions. Yet, it is unlikely that they would have the same sort of lines of succession. The last issue is the various types of undead, and this could feed back into the noble houses. Would vampires live in the town of the dead? Potentially yes. But unlike other undead, they need to eat. And sadly, their body waste isn't well documented in history or mythology. So let's assume that they need to relieve themselves. That would again bring up the need of a sewage system, and then we would need a food supply for them. After that, we are dealing with the less intelligent undead, such as the modern zombie. Likely, that could land them as a lower caste. One based on abilities, and the cause of reanimation most likely. Lastly, we have to deal with visitors. Many are likely going to be traders and merchants from living cities. There will need to be accommodations for the living. With them, that would mean food, drink, lodging, and so on. Yet, there is something interesting that comes up in an undead city. Remember, there are ages of undead potentially in the city. And with that comes skills and techniques lost to the ages. What sort of food would you be able to find? Well, there are potentially chefs still. Well, not living, but undead from ages past, which can treat you to lost meals. That could bring the attention of many. In addition, you could get musicians and artists that look in history coming along. These could be things of value which people might travel for to get access to. So while not tangible, these could be seen as things worth a bit. They could also serve another role, and that is as historians. I talked about this a bit before when I did a video on elves and their impact on things like history and archaeology. And the undead could potentially have the same impact. They could easily have someone which was present during major events. Of course, they could easily offer twisted opinions of the events. Seriously, look at some of the historic documents about the various Roman emperors. You will find some insane allegations and twisted comments. Yeah, they will likely add in their own thoughts into the situation. So, any historian would need to do their due diligence. Lastly, we have the hostile undead problem. A war against such a city is going to be a bit different. Sieging them is going to be difficult. You can't starve them out. So, you'll need to use a higher level of offense here. Of course, if they are being supported by a lich or two, then they become the high target for assassination and surgical strike operations. Overall, there are several major changes that come with an undead city, from the structural changes to the very basic principles which you focus on when laying out the city. Even the key priorities of the city change. There are a lot of things you will need to think about when looking at undead cities. Thank you for watching, adventurers. Please return next time. Until then, I'll see you on the roads.